Thank you everyone for inviting me to speak today. Deanne Minniecon, I'm coming from Jagera Yagara and Yuggarabil People's lands today and speaking to you around Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health, I guess. I've got two slides and I just want to just pay attention to this slide throughout the presentation if that's possible, but I'm going to refer to the second slide now, which is all around the data and around how Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are, their obesity rates are much higher. We know this. It's similar with chronic disease, whether they're adults or young children. And so we need to do a lot more around how do we prioritise, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health and everything that we do. So back to the next, to the first slide, if that's okay. When we talk about obesity for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, we have to consider a number of things. And one of those things is, firstly, I always tell people is to look at our Australian history and the impact that that has had on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and where we are today in terms of our health outcomes. We need to look at the environments in which we live to support, that we live that either doesn't support or supports healthy lifestyles. And we also need to look at the strengths that are in our communities when we're trying to address obesity or any chronic disease issues within our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities across Australia. Now, prior to colonisation, and in the first, you can see the history up in the left-hand corner. Prior to colonisation, we were healthy people. And past policy, Australian policies have interrupted our food supplies and our food systems, our culture, and how that knowledge is passed down to our children. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people had restrictions on places of that they were able to access their natural resources, so restricted access to land since colonisation, and so there's been limited access to hunting and fishing practices that has constrained our access to nutritious and fresh food sources, which again can lead to poor health outcomes. So our original healthy foods back in past, prior to colonisation, our original healthy foods have now been replaced by Western style food that are high in sugars and fats. So up until the 1960s or so, depending on where you are in Australia, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people lived on missions and farms, and they were often paid in rations of the worst nutritional kind, which is your white flours, your refined sugars, your salts, your teas. So you can see the impact that history has on Aboriginal people today by removing us from our lands and our natural food sources to this kind of worst kind of foods that we now live with today. And so obviously the outcomes have impacted on us around obesity, chronic disease, and sort of physical distress as well. Access to affordable foods and nutritious foods is an ongoing problem, not just only in the remote rural communities, but also obviously in the metropolitan and regional areas. And while we're all affected by the extra costs of living today, wherever we live, people in rural remote areas have that additional cost of living, and they suffer from generally unavailable fresh fruit and vegetables and other high quality foods. And the experiences that I've had personally to be up in a remote community and, limited fruit and vegetables or fresh foods and the price of those foods it's really difficult to live. And when you're being asked, and we can deliver as many healthy programs as we want, but if your environments aren't supporting those lifestyle, that to try and live a healthy lifestyle, then we're kind of struggling right there. Physical activity can be a challenge in some communities with animal management issues, and I'm not just talking about dog issues. We're talking about cattle issues. We're talking about crocodile issues. We're talking about, name it, snake issues. And so people, there are animal management issues. When we say just go for a walk and walk 20 minutes or walk for 30 minutes, you have to take into consideration the people's environments around animal management, safe walking pathways, quality drinking water, and obviously shade. So where we've got up in the north, there's a lot of heat. We need to make sure people are safe when they're doing physical activity. It's also important to address that social and cultural determinants of health that lie outside of health sector. So we need to make sure that when we're developing policies around this space, that we need to think about the transport issues, the road, land, resources, education, housing, history, and cultural issues when we're dealing with these kinds of issues. So it's not just a health problem. It affects every single sector, and we need every single sector to come on board in making change. Now, I've talked about the deficits approach and, inadequate food and diets, food insecurity, poor dietary practices, but we need to change that language, and we need to take on a more strength-based approach. So when we talk about foods, like Foods are around medicine. For us, food is just not eating to be, to keep ourselves from not being hungry. Foods are medicines to us. Animals and plants can be medicine. So it's more than just that. So taking that strength-based approach, a strength-based approach recognises the resilience of individuals. It focuses on abilities, knowledge and capabilities rather than what people do not know or can't do. Focuses on we need to focus on factors that support health and well-being rather than factors that cause disease. We need an approach that's strength and expertise can be built upon and celebrated. We need to use the language, and it's been mentioned before, that's strength-based, non-judgmental and inclusive, and recognise complexities and have a commitment to social justice. And most importantly, we need to make sure that we value Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledge. Aboriginal Islander people have been nutritionists, dietitians, health practitioners for many thousands of years, and we need to value their knowledge and bring that into the work that we do. Thank you very much.